So I don't know if you guys can see, I am sporting my, here, I'll move it closer to the camera. No, I'm not doing that very well. Over here. There we go. I have my little live long and prosper button that I've now turned upside down. This is a very precious thing to me. I got it as a child from something that was called the Federation Trading Post that existed in Berkeley, California. And it was this little fan-run store where you could go in and buy uniforms and things like buttons, and it was Mecca for me as a kid. I absolutely loved that place. Used to make my parents take me into Berkeley at the drop of a hat so that I could visit there. It has long since gone out of business, but I still have one of their buttons. And I'm afraid even all of that doesn't make me as big a fan of Star Trek as this gentleman, Mr. Colley. I forget exactly, blanking on his first name, but he is the gentleman who has decided to do the Star Trek New Voyages online series. And I was actually unfamiliar with the fact that that was out there and available, but it has been in production for a while. They have something like 11 episodes that are already out there. They've gotten Walter Koenig and James Doohan and George Takei to come, and lots of the former writers from Star Trek, the original series, to come and participate in their project. And I believe they have developed for their own series some scripts that never made it into production for various other Star Trek projects. So they have some. They have a very respectful approach toward CBS and Paramount, and have sort of existed at the pleasure of the rights holders for some time, and seemed to me a little ticked off that Axanar came along, because Axanar brought a whole lot of attention to this full-length feature film that they are attempting to make with regular Hollywood production values, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the New Voyages folks would have rather that Axanar just let them, hadn't existed. They would have continued to sort of fly under the radar, and maybe CBS and Paramount wouldn't have had to come out with their guidelines. Now, not only don't let Axanar really proceed in its envisioned form, but also New Voyages is in trouble too. But what Mr. Colley has done to film New Voyages, he apparently was an intern at The Next Generation. And as he was finishing up his internship, and I'm afraid, Emory, I don't have anything this cool to pass along to you.
I was going to say, yeah, I need to go at least make a visit to the studio.
Yeah,
see what I can grab at the last minute.
Whatever, maybe someone will give you some interesting blueprints, because that's what happened to Mr. Colley. He was given blueprints to the original sets of the original series. And rather than just say, cool, I have these blueprints, he rented himself space in a former grocery store and started to build them out. And so we're seeing some footage from New Voyages. And if you just look at the sets, the detail of the sets, they just were incredibly faithful to how the original sets were built, the materials the original sets were built with. I remember reading at one place that they found out that the carpeting used on the original sets was industrial grade carpeting used in car trunks. They went out and bought rolls of the stuff and used the same kind of carpeting. I mean, just incredible attention to detail. So this series has been out there. My son and I are excited to watch it now. And they have 2 additional episodes that are in production that they began before the new guidelines came out. And they don't have plans to release them until they have specific permission to do so. The other thing, they don't plan to make new episodes unless and until they're given permission to do that. What they have done, though, is turn their incredible playground of very faithfully reproduced sets into a tour that you can go to in New York and visit the place itself, buy tickets. And that is licensed from CBS and Paramount. They have been negotiating with them at least on that front. And I'm sure they're in talks with them about what to do with the 2 unreleased episodes, et cetera. But it seems to me like they have pivoted away from we're doing this online series to we're going to work together to have an attraction that allows people to visit these sets.
And does it sound to anybody like they're actually going to get proper permission to release those last 2 episodes? Because from my read, Paramount is very politely saying, no, shut it down, and if you release anything else, we will go after you.
I don't know. I haven't seen the correspondence between the parties. I know that Mr. Colley and his group don't plan to test the legal waters. I don't think they want to be sued. I don't think they want to be in the position of arguing this is fair use and we're going to launch ahead and the elements we're using are not copyrightable. And they're not taking the Axanar we'll fight this tooth and nail approach. It's worth revisiting what's going on with Axanar at this point, because we had some impression back in the May-June timeframe of this year that the suit against Axanar was going to get dropped. J.J. Abrams made statements in connection with the release of Star Trek Beyond that the studio was going to work with the fans and guidelines would be forthcoming. Well, the guidelines were forthcoming, and they really don't allow for the making of a movie like Axanar. So as things stand, the lawsuit is still pending. The parties have answered each other's preliminary documents in the lawsuit, and that's still ongoing. So we'll just have to see what happens with New Voyages, and if they do. I mean, the statements that I have read that they've put out have said that they expect that Axanar will have to wind its way through the courts and get resolved before they can have that conversation.
Right, because the very first guideline that was laid down was it can't be longer than 15 minutes for a self-contained story, or a total of 30 minutes for a maximum of 2 segments, which already Axanar, it's not going to make the cut. I'd love to get your take on this, because if you look at the actual guidelines that Paramount released through their legal, it looks as if they're saying, look, we understand, we love our fans have sustained us even through the hard years. We know that there's been a long tradition of fan fiction, which is now making its way into video production, now that video production is actually affordable, and we want to continue that tradition. And then the next 10 things that they say, I don't know a single fan production out there that would meet the guidelines, because it's not only limited length, it's not only can you not pay your actors or any of your principals, it's also things like you cannot involve anybody who has ever had anything to do with a Star Trek property, which is basically, okay, yeah, you can do your thing, but no, you can't do your thing.
Yes, it's almost like they're trying their hardest to make sure that they have the same sort of protections in place that they would have without the guidelines, and yet use the guidelines to make
the New Voyager crew
PR.
would. Sorry about that, Denise. It's hard to chime in when I can't see the screen. Yeah, I was just saying that I think that Padre, you're absolutely right on the. I want to say on the New Voyagers Facebook page, they said something to the effect of, first of all, you can tell that. They obviously really value their relationship with CBS and have tried to be really respectful of it. And they're trying to say that on their Facebook page, they said, first of all, Paramount has not shut us down, but we are now just switching this to a, museum exhibit as opposed to continuing to make fan films, because we can't make fan films under the new guidelines. So, yeah, it is a real shame. It reminds me of, the when we were all hearing that, that CBS was going to encourage fan films, or that the Axanar lawsuit was going away, I think was how it was said earlier. That doesn't necessarily paint a good picture for the rest of the fan community, or for the people that want to make projects like this. So yeah, it's no real surprise to me that we don't have firm guidelines, or we don't have a firm idea of what exactly is or is not permitted yet. And yeah, I agree. I think that we're going to have to see how this winds its way through the courts before we have, a better idea of what exactly is allowed. And it's a shame, because I think that well, personally, I think that the fan film community, there is an argument that it is fair use. I don't necessarily see that argument being successful in court.
Right.
So at least not in the current, waters. So yeah, it's going to be very interesting to follow, and very disappointing if projects like these are, chilled, because I didn't know about this. I'm going to spend some of my weekend going back over their archives and watching some old new Trek.
Yep, I am too. So the Wall Street Journal did a profile on these folks yesterday or the day before, and about 6 different people sent it my way. So I was happy to learn of their existence through that. And it was really focused on the whole act of what an uber fan James Cawley is for having taken these blueprints and set up in an old grocery store these very, very faithfully reproduced sets. And then it's sort of as a side note, and by the way, he's been doing a web series in the sets for quite some time, which looks really good, actually. I mean, for, it probably doesn't have the budget and special effects, et cetera, that Axanar seems to have if you look at their trailer and such, but it looks very entertaining, and the fact that they
nailed the hairstyles.
Yes. And the furniture.
Totally nailed the hairstyles.
Yes.
Actually, and the one who plays the Spock wannabe, the Vulcan character, they really did well with that one. The ears, the prosthetics, everything looks just about what you would expect from the old series. But Denise, Emory, I want to ask you, specifically a legal question here, which is, we hear often that you have to defend your copyright because if you don't defend it, it goes away. But how much do you have to defend? Because I've got a couple of friends who actually do work for CBS. And the way that they were explaining it to me was that the studio is doing the bare minimum to maintain copyright. But is that right? Because this does not sound like bare minimum. This sounds like maximum.
I think that you're incorrect, actually. Yeah, and Denise, feel free to take this away.
I think you're confusing a couple of different types of IP law. The one where you have to really defend it, even though you might want to let some incidents slide, is the trademark arena.
Oh, that's okay.
Which is still relevant here.
Yeah,
so that's why they're not going to allow anyone to use the word Star Trek. You can't put that anywhere in your production, and it has to say this is a Star Trek fan production.
Well, I mean, just even saying that this is a Star Trek fan production is, using their trademark, which is why it makes this all, the whole fan film and fan art community such a sticky subject. Because, copyright, you don't at all have to defend your copyright. Trademark, you do have a sort of use it or lose it and defend it or lose it to dilution. But on the other hand, the question of fair use comes up, and there is no fair use for trademarks, but obviously this is the sort of thing that wouldn't necessarily cause consumer confusion, which is sort of the root, the policy reasoning behind trademarks, and the policy reasoning behind why you have to defend your trademark. I don't think that today we have that. I don't think that's the case today. I think that we as consumers are experienced enough, sophisticated enough to recognize that this film is not made by CBS, that this is a Star Trek fan film. So Denise, if you want to take it away from here,
Well, the thing that we don't have any law professors on the show today, an unusual thing for our show, but the one thing that stands out to me, well, there are several nuggets you could pull out of these fact patterns and drill down on whether it's infringement or fair use. But as far as James Cawley is concerned, they're doing a lot of the things that Axanar is doing. They're using characters and costumes, designs of makeup like Vulcan ears. And I think those are all things that have been complained about in the Axanar lawsuit, in addition to use of the Klingon language. But the faithfully reproducing the sets thing, I think, would be a really meaty issue to get into and analyze. If you've been given the blueprints, and I'm sure there was no sort of authorized transfer of the blueprints. It was just kind of like, I have these and here you go. And then you actually act on them and build this stuff out and use it. The one thing that New Voyages never did. I think they did raise money to help, pay for the production, et cetera, but it's never been a profit-oriented enterprise that they were covering their expenses. So I think that certainly probably factored into CBS and Paramount taking a hands-off approach. Look, these are just ardent fans. Nobody's making any money here. It's just a labor of love and devotion. But that again, that's not their legal obligation to let a labor of love and devotion persist. But I'm sure it comes into the mix when they're deciding whether or not to sue. So I'd love to see a law professor put on an exam, someone faithfully reproduces the original series sets, discuss the causes of action and defenses, because there would be several.